My daughter caused $30,000 of property damage, and I'll gladly pay every penny. My wife and I got home from work to find 2 police cars in my driveway, and my 15-year-old Yolanda sitting on our porch steps with her head bowed, sawdust in her hair. Next door, the damage was catastrophic. What had been a magnificent 20-foot Japanese maple imported from Kyoto now lay in pieces across our neighbor Daniel's manicured lawn. Yolanda had taken my chainsaw to it, and she'd been thorough. The trunk was cut into sections, branches scattered everywhere. 30 years of growth destroyed in minutes. Daniel was screaming at the officers about pressing charges. That tree was worth $30,000. She's a vandal. I want her arrested. Yolanda, what the hell happened? I asked, my stomach sinking as I looked at the destruction. She looked up at me with steady eyes, sawdust still clinging to her dark hair. I had to cut it down, Dad. You had to? I stared at her in disbelief while my wife Linda started to cry. You destroyed their property. This is a felony. Daniel stormed over, his face purple with rage. Your daughter is psychotic. That tree was worth more than your house. The officer stepped between us and said we needed to discuss this calmly. Linda grabbed Yolanda's shoulders, checking her for injuries. Always the protective mother, even when our kid had clearly lost her mind. Yolanda, explain yourself right now, I said, trying to keep my voice level. She stood up slowly, and I noticed her hands were shaking despite her calm face. She looked at Daniel and said, I had to get rid of that tree because you've been climbing it to watch me through my bedroom window while I'm changing. The entire scene went silent. Daniel's face went from purple to white in seconds. That's a disgusting lie, he sputtered. She's making things up to avoid consequences. Yolanda pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and showed us a video. The quality was grainy, but clear enough to see a figure in the tree outside her second-story window. I've been recording for weeks because I knew no one would believe me. Look at the timestamp. This was Tuesday at 11 p.m. while I was getting ready for bed. My blood started to heat up as I watched the footage. Linda's hand went to her mouth. That could be anyone, Daniel said quickly, his voice climbing higher. Kids climb trees all the time. Maybe it was someone else's teenager pulling pranks. You have that class ring you never take off? Yolanda said quietly. You can see it in the video where you're holding the branch. I looked closer at the footage and could see the distinctive ring glinting in the moonlight. The same ring Daniel was wearing right now. I was reeling, hating that my daughter thought she'd need proof before she could tell us she was being violated when she said something that hit like a hammer. But that's not even why I had cut it down. Her voice cracked for the first time and she said, last night I woke up at 2 a.m. and he was in my room. The world tilted. I felt Linda's sharp intake of breath beside me. The officer's hand moved to his radio. She's lying, Daniel shouted, but he was backing away now. I've never been in your house. Yolanda's voice was barely a whisper, but every word was clear. You came through my window. You stood at the foot of my bed watching me. When I pretended to still be asleep, you walked around my room touching my things. You touched my diary on my desk. You went through my clothes in the hamper. You stood over me, breathing like a serial killer. Her voice broke completely. I was so scared I couldn't move. I just lay there praying you would leave. I started moving toward Daniel, but the officer held me back. My hands were shaking with rage I'd never felt before. Yolanda held up her phone again, her hand shaking so badly she could barely hold it steady. I have a recording app that activates with motion detection. I installed it 3 weeks ago when the watching started. She showed the officer her screen. Here's him climbing through my window. Here's him in my room standing over my bed. The officer's face went hard as he watched. He immediately called for backup. Daniel was still spouting bullshit. It's not what it seems, he begged. I was just checking because she leaves her window unlocked and I was worried about security for the neighborhood. You were in my daughter's room? I roared, breaking free from the officer's grip. You were watching her change? She's 15 years old. Linda was crying now, holding Yolanda who stood there still and brave but shaking like a leaf. My baby girl had to sleep knowing you were watching her. She had to see you at neighborhood barbecues knowing what you were doing. She had to live in fear in her own room. The tree was the only way he could reach my window, Yolanda said, tears finally falling. I tried putting up curtains but he got angles around them. I tried telling Mom last week I didn't want her to be upset. Every night I'd lie awake watching that tree, waiting to see his shadow. After last night when he was in my room I knew he'd come back. I knew he'd do something worse next time. The tree had to go. The officer was now reading Daniel his rights while calling for additional units. Daniel was stammering about misunderstandings and property damage, but his wife had already gone inside, presumably to pack. I pulled Yolanda into the tightest hug of her life, feeling her shake against me. I'll cut down every tree in this neighborhood if it keeps you safe. I'm sorry about the tree, Dad, she whispered into my chest. I know it was expensive, but I couldn't think of anything else to do. Don't you dare apologize, I said fiercely. You protected yourself when we failed to notice. I'm so proud of you. That's when Daniel broke free and lunged toward us. Full story on the channel below.